here. We're back with another episode of True North Sports Talk Podcast, and we are about to witness an important playoff series for Canadian baseball. Now, the Blue Jays are hosting the Seattle Mariners in Game 1 of the American League Championship Series. The winner of that series goes on to the World Series, and we're going to be looking at a lot of different things in regard to that series today. We're going to get you ready, let you know all the ins and outs, and some info you may not have heard. Now, this is the first Blue Jays ALCS appearance, and most of us who are old enough will remember 2016, the last time they faced the Cleveland Guardians in the ALCS. They haven't been back since, and they haven't been to the World Series since 1993. Now, there is a huge section of Toronto Blue Jays fans who weren't even alive 32 years ago, the last time they won it. Kevin Gausman once again gets the ball for Game 1 for this Toronto Blue Jays team. This is the guy who went out and did an admirable job against the New York Yankees in Game 1, managing the butterflies, managing all the things that go along with something as special as being in the ALDS for the first time, again, 9 years ago. This matchup hasn't happened that often in the playoffs. 2022, the wild card series that the Mariners won 2-0, that's the last time this series took place. And that was the first time, if memory serves. Now, Skydome is going to be absolutely packed with baseball fans tonight. This is the number 1 seed Blue Jays versus the number 2 seed Mariners, as you might expect at this point in the playoffs. Toronto has the slight edge favor-wise in this series, but Seattle just pulled off a 15-inning thriller. We'll get into more on that a bit later on as we go through this, to win their division series over the Detroit Tigers. So, this is shaping up to be one of the best ALCS matchups we've seen in recent history. On the Blue Jays side, one of the most significant losses they have, as we found out, started to at least last night. We started to find out a little bit more this morning that Bo Bichette will not be on the ALCS roster, and thus, if we want to see him in a Blue Jays uniform again this season, it's going to have to be in the World Series. Alright, so as we move along here, hopefully y'all will be tuning in tonight. It will, in Canada, it will be on Sportsnet. 8 o'clock start tonight. And the Toronto Blue Jays roster. What are we going to be looking at here for this? As per usual, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will be the focal point, as he has been throughout the ALDS. He'll likely be in his usual 3 spot, as he's been all season, and he brings, as usual, we all know this, Canadian fans, he has that combination of power, consistency, and throughout the Yankees series, we saw that playoff clutch factor. When Vladdy comes in and makes the plays like he did early on against the Yankees, we think of that home run. That was before the Grand Slam. He had a home run. He had that beautiful play at first base, doubling off Jazz Chisholm Jr. And so when he comes in and sets the tone and just really calms things down for the Blue Jays, he's the guy, that little engine that makes this team go. So, it's hard to argue right now that Guerrero Jr. would be considered up there in the top 5, maybe top 10 players in all of baseball at the moment. His performance in the ALDS was electric, setting the tone early, and he's got the pressure of representing Canada on his shoulders, but he did it so well in that American League Division Series. Alright, so one of the next players that we're going to take a look at here is the veteran of the roster, that being George Springer. He brings the leadership at this point in his career. He has the postseason experience, being a former World Series MVP, all that stuff in his days in Houston, and he has that experience that matters most in October baseball. He had a few big moments in the division series, a double here, a single there, stole some bases, and basically just did George Springer things. He has that veteran presence that the young guys, they all look to. As we saw throughout the season, well, he's a home run threat every time he steps into that batter's box. However, up and down this Blue Jays roster, almost 1 through 9, you have guys who can really step in to that absence that Bo Bichette has left behind in that roster. You think about guys like a Davis Schneider. He can get a home run here and there. He's on base a lot. This team, we have to mention it, is the hardest team in the major leagues to strike out. They are going to grind out at bats. They are going to make those Seattle pitchers work overtime trying to get them out. Even the recent return of Anthony Santander in the division series, we saw even him, even when he got out 6, 8, 10, 12 pitch at bats from these players, that is a good thing because that gets them to that Seattle bullpen a lot quicker. That wears out all of the pitching that they can throw at the Blue Jays. And after that 15 inning wrap up to the ALDS, and that was just 2 days ago, so there isn't much rest for Seattle. They don't get a lot of time to just sit back and go, oh, let's get some rest, we'll get that. No, like, they really are in a tough spot because not only did they end on Friday night, then they have to fly to Toronto, and they don't have a lot of time to regroup for this series. So we'll see if that plays a part here. As we've been talking about, there's supporting bats throughout this lineup. You got your Nathan Lucas, your Ernie Clement, Miles Straw when he's in there, Davis Schneider when he's in there, Kirky, Varsho. We didn't even talk about Varsho, who had like a 4-for-4 game with all extra base hits in that division series. I mean, Barger, need I say more? He's got that cannon no matter where he's playing, whether it's right field, whether it's third base. He can launch one whenever, I wouldn't say whenever he wants to because that's not how baseball works, but he is a threat that you have to contend with every time he comes to the plate. Heck, even Ernie Clement was throwing home runs at the Yankees. So this is a Blue Jays lineup that is going to be tough for the Seattle pitchers. On the other side of that game, you got Kevin Gausman. He was solid. You have Trey Savage looking real strong. You're bringing back what will hopefully be arrested Chris Bassett, arrested Max Scherzer. Hopefully they will be able to step in and be their usual selves as opposed to what we saw coming down the stretch. So this lineup has surprised most of the league this year with the depth that it's able to throw out there, and just be able to, from your 1, 2, 3, which is usually Springer, Lucas, or Davis Schneider. Then you got Vladdy. Right behind Vladdy's usually Barger. Then you got Kirk. You can flip flop those two guys. You got Varsho hitting fifth, sixth, somewhere in there. Then you're stepping into Ernie Clement. You're stepping into Miles Straw. Somewhere in there, depending on whether he's starting or not, you got Anthony Santander, usually fifth, sixth, seventh. And so that lineup just keeps going and going and going. The One of the big things that having Santander back means you don't have to go to your bench quite as often, being a switch hitter with power from both sides of the plate. Now the question will be, can Santander provide enough defense that it warrants keeping him on the field? Because there were times in that Yankees series where you had at least this analyst thinking, why is he even on this roster right now? Now then he'd grind out some at bats and it would look a little better, but his fielding really needs to come into its own during the CS, as opposed to what we saw with some missed plays in the division series. And so yeah, like, we really need those big moments from Santander. So switching gears now, we mentioned quickly the pitching staff, and we have Gausman in game one. Now, as they did with New York, I would run Savage out there for game two, just simply because you want to keep him as often as possible playing at home in front of the home crowd. That's where he will be most comfortable at this stage of his career. And yeah, you want to get game one and two. You want to be going out to Seattle with a lead in the series, not just a split. If you're Seattle now, you're coming into Toronto hoping to steal at least one of these games. Now, if I'm Seattle, I'm looking at both of these first two pitchers and I'm going, well, let's see if we could steal the Gausman game maybe. Or maybe we're the ones who can figure out Trey Savage, or whatever they're thinking internally, is they got to figure that out in a big, big way. So you have Gausman going in game one. He just came off a real good appearance in the division series. He's composed, experienced, and exactly who you want on the mound in October. He's got the fastball, the splitter is devastating, he throws in the odd slider. His playoff performance has been exceptional throughout this postseason, and he really did and does set the tone for the entire series with game one. Well, you have some veteran presence on this roster that wasn't there before. You have Max Scherzer, who's been added to the mix, and he sat out the division series. He watched. His experience in just talking to Trey Savage, being there for Kevin Gausman, and all the things on and on, that his experience in October is invaluable even if he's not at his best or on the field. This is the thing. Toronto has the depth they need for this best of 7 series, because if you keep Eric Lauer, stretch him out maybe even a little bit, he can come in behind a Max Scherzer or a Chris Bassett if they run into trouble. Speaking of Chris Bassett, he's been added back to the ALCS roster, and he provides a length and a quality that you're going to want to see, especially game 3, game 4, as this series progresses, because they have that been there, done that mentality that you need going into an opposing stadium. And we haven't even mentioned Shane Bieber yet. I mean, he's going to be there too. And so you got 5 viable starting pitchers that you can run out there and at least see what they got. Now, if you need to, you can move a Bassett to the bullpen for a game. He can give you 4 or 5 innings out of the bullpen, being as he's stretched out, as can Eric Lauer. That takes pressure off of some of the other more high leverage arms, that they don't have to come in and try and get 2 or 3 innings. And so the bullpen, let's talk about it. Toronto's depth has really been showing in this bullpen this year. The additions of a Louis Varland. You got Eric Lauer transitioning to the bullpen. The addition of Sir Anthony Dominguez. You got the emergence of a Braden Fisher. You got the emergence of a Mason Fluharty. You got all these guys that they didn't have in years past that have come out and just been like, here I am, let's do this. So this is the team that is representing all of Canada. They are more than aware of that fact as a team, and in fact they thrive off of being Canada's team. Alright, we're going to take a pause right here, and we're going to take a look at what the Blue Jays have shown here as being their roster for this particular series. Now there you have it, up there on the screen. You got your pitchers. You got Chris Bassett, Shane Bieber, you got Kevin Gausman, Scherzer, you got Yasevich. That's your starting pitching, not in the order that you're going to face them. Then in the bullpen, you got Sir Anthony Dominguez, Braden Fisher, Mason Fluharty. You got Eric Lauer, Brandon Little. That's 3 strong lefties coming out of the bullpen. We haven't even mentioned Yariel Rodriguez and the effect he had on the Yankees series when he was in there. You got Louis Varland, who, he kind of gave up the home run to Judge in Game 3. But the way he bounced back to start, not even just pitching, he started Game 4 and he just laid it down the way he failed to do the night before. So that bounce back you love to see from a guy like Varland, because you're going to need these guys to be on their P's and Q's coming into the next series. Your catchers there, Heineman, he didn't see a moment on the field that I'm aware of in the DS, but he's a switch hitting backup catcher that he can run the bases if he needs to. He can pinch hit if you need him to. And he is an admirable fill-in if for any reason you feel you need something late inning where you bring Kirk out of the game. Obviously, you got Alejandro Kirk there. Your infielders for the series, you got your Barger, they're considering a third baseman. He can also go out to right field if you need him to. You got Clement, who is either, most likely going to play either second or third. Second or third. Jimenez has been the shortstop almost immediately after Bichette was injured. Obviously, you got Vladdy at first. You got Kiner Falefa as a Swiss Army knife, as it were, kind of like Clement is, where those two guys can play all 3 of the infield positions, second, third, or short. In the outfield, again, you got Barger if you want to put him in right. You got Lucas, Santander, Schneider. Springer's likely going to be your DH, but he can play left or right field. You can put him in center if you need to. You got Miles Straw, Gold Glove. You got Dalton Varsho, Gold Glove. And so that rounds out your roster for this particular thing, or for the ALCS. Alright, so let's take a look at, and I'm going to put it up on the screen here, let's take a look at what we have for Seattle. Let's see, get up there, there we go. All right, so let's have a look. So we have Bryce Miller. He is going to be the starter for game one opposite Gausman tonight. And you have Luis Castillo. He's always been tough. You got Bizzardo and Logan Gilbert. He was good in the Detroit series. You got Brian Wu. We're going to talk about him a little bit. Gabe Spear. This is a well-pitched Seattle team. And you got your infielders, J.P. Crawford, Josh Naylor, Jorge Polanco. Those guys bring a lot of power to this Seattle infield. You got Leo Rivas, who in the previous series got his very first postseason hit. You got Eugenio Suarez. He was solid. Your outfielders, we all know here in the American League East, Randy Arozarena, as he played a long time for the Tampa Bay Rays, and he was a bit of a Jays killer at times when he played with them. You got Victor Robles. Obviously, you got to always be watching Julio Rodriguez. Miles Mastrobuoni. He's kind of their Swiss Army knife. You got Cal Raleigh. You can't say enough about the year that guy's had. 60 home runs, at least one more in the playoffs so far. You got his backups, Mitch Garver and Harry Ford. And that rounds out the roster for the Seattle Mariners going into this ALCS. Now, Seattle ended their longest playoff drought and the longest playoff drought in professional sports history by making it to the ALDS. I guess they're not counting the wild card they played against us 2 years ago. And they won it, so I'm really not sure, because I've heard this on TV too, I'm not sure where they're talking about this playoff drought, because again, they had that wild card against the Blue Jays in 2022, and they won that series moving on to the ALDS. So I've been hearing and seeing about this playoff drought, but I just don't see it that way. They've had that one drive there. But their narrative, they've been playing off of this longest playoff drought thing, heading into the ALDS, now heading into the ALCS. They're enjoying the underdog position coming into this series because they feel like this is a Jays team they were looking up at most of the summer. This is a Jays team that they're hoping that their record against the Jays was really good this year and that they'll be able to feed off of that going into the ALCS. Now, they are driven by a lot of power. There's legitimate pop in their lineup. They can and probably will match up very well offensively against Toronto. It's going to be in the little things and how well the games are pitched that this comes down to. They scored enough runs to win their division, series, and they have a real good mix of power and contact throughout their order. They have a lot of speed. Again, J.P. Crawford, Jorge Polanco, just to name a few. Julio Rodriguez, you can't sleep on him. He'll be able to steal bases. There's going to be a lot more pressure on Alejandro Kirk in this series than there was against the Yankees, although the Yankees did try and steal a few bases. And defensively, they are really aggressive because they have that speed. It can be effective, but as we saw with the Yankees, it can backfire at times as well. They have a bit of a different style from Toronto's more traditional approach. They don't bunt as much. They may not run the bases as much, stealing bases. They can exploit weaknesses in opposing defenses, but they are a bit more of like a no, what's the word I'm looking for? They're more of like a data driven team than the Blue Jays are. So, again, power hitters, contact hitters up and down. They're a younger team in a lot of places in their lineup. So they mix that with the veteran experience that they have. There's very little in the way of a major hole in their everyday lineup. So the Blue Jays are going to have to really do what they've been doing all year long, what they did with the Yankees all year long, and that is put a lot of pressure on that defense to make sure that those, because when you put pressure on defenses, I don't care who you are, if you put pressure on the defense, it's going to rush, it's going to make mistakes, and that's what Seattle has to avoid with this Toronto lineup. So there may not be a lot of holes in the lineup, but the key is going to be getting timely hits when it matters and making sure they limit those errors when the time comes. Again, Bryce Miller gets the ball in game one. This is actually where a lot of their strength comes from. They have an elite pitching staff, and it has been their backbone all season. Their pitching staff has strikeout stuff. Cal Raleigh is great at mixing up pitches for his pitchers, making sure they're not like fastball heavy, curveball, breaking ball heavy. None of that. It's mixing it up, being effective. Say you're going down and away, then you go up and in, stuff like that. Like you got to mix your locations, mix up your different kind of pitches, and just that's one of the great things for the Mariners about having a backstop like Cal Raleigh. It was shocking the other night. I remember watching that game against Detroit where the pitcher threw a splitter and Cal Raleigh, for the first time all year, allowed a pass ball because usually if it goes by him, it's a wild pitch. But this one really was on him because he kept his glove this way instead of turning it over to catch the ball or at least knock it down. And he tried to trap the ball on the ground. And this time it just really didn't work out and bounced away from him. That's probably one of the most awkward moments Cal Raleigh's had all year. In low scoring games, which is what the Mariners are always looking to do, they are right there in the game. They can break it open with a home run. So they're looking to compete in a low scoring game. So that's what they're trying to get you into. Now their rotation depth, as we mentioned, some of their pitchers, Luis Castillo, on down, Brian Wu is on the roster this time. He brings more depth, and he will be available for the series. He can provide quality starts when called upon. He contributes to the Mariners' strong pitching depth, and he's part of why the Seattle Mariners are a dangerous team despite being the slightly lower seed coming into the series. Their starters have been elite all season. They have the ability to shut down opposing offenses. Just ask the Detroit Tigers, as they did it often and all the time against that team. And playoff baseball, it often goes to the team with the better pitching. So Seattle doesn't have to match Toronto's offensive firepower or just their offense as much, provided they have or are able to field the better pitching. Their bullpen depth, they have multiple reliable arms. They have a strong closer. We didn't even talk about the Blue Jays closer that much because he didn't really pitch a whole lot in the Yankees series. So he should be well rested coming into this one. They are fresh off that extra inning game where they had to use a lot of that depth to get through 15 innings. They have proven that they can win with October-style baseball, and their pitching is actually one of the more underrated parts of their roster. Now, they just pulled off an extra inning thriller at home in Seattle. They can say that gives them momentum coming into this game, and you can't underestimate their confidence right now. But at the same time, what is that going to do to their pitching staff? What is that going to do to their hitters? That was a really long game, like I would say 4+ hours of baseball, and then they had to get on a plane and fly to Toronto and start the preparation process to get through it and be able to be ready for tonight's game. They also had to make the roster decisions that they needed over the last couple of days. Try and get some fresh arms in the bullpen, maybe, that they might have left off the ALDS roster. And so, yeah, that's our Seattle story for the day. Now, we're going to look at some key storylines and see what we get here. Toronto's offense is going to be the big story versus Seattle's pitching. This is where it's going to come down to. Again, we talked about the Jays, led by Vladimir Guerrero. They're going to have to grind out at bats, be loose and at home in the batter's box. Don't swing at the bad pitches. Make them come to you. And even if you do happen to get out, a 10-12 pitch at bat is just as good as a one-pitch single. It means you're putting miles on the pitcher's arms, especially a team, again, coming off a 15-inning game. You want to get to them early and often and make sure they don't have a chance to bounce back from that game. This is going to be one of the most compelling matchups, being Toronto's offense against Seattle's pitching in the series. If Toronto's bats are for some reason quiet, if they used all their bullets against New York, then this is going to mean the Jays have to find other ways to win. They're going to have to be economic in their pitching, in their hitting. And if Seattle can't get their strikeout stuff in order, and if they are in any way just the Blue Jays are making them work, they're going to run into trouble themselves. So, Toronto is going to have to hit Seattle early and often. They're going to have to set the tone with their pitching, and they really have to jump on them right out of the gate, knowing that they're going to be a little bit tired coming off of that Detroit series. That was a dogfight back and forth. Not even just the last game, but there were a few games before that as well. For the Blue Jays, you have to set the tone early. Skydome is going to be raucous and rocking, and you want them to be loud and give them reason to be if you're the Blue Jays. For Seattle, that experience in the extra innings, going 15 innings, and they even had some earlier games that went to extra innings, they're going to have to bring that experience, and that's the kind of mental toughness that they need to translate into the ALCS. They proved in that division series that they can win tight games, that they can win emotional games, so you can't count them out when the game is on the line. Now, Toronto plays at Skydome. This is one of the best home field advantages in all of baseball. 45,000 fans going crazy for their team. That creates a lot of noise advantage. And on top of that, that just gives the home team a huge boost as well. You got to remember, there's a reason I really wanted the Blue Jays to win the American League East Division and be ahead of all the other teams in the American League, is that gave them the home field advantage. As Michael Jordan used to say back in the day, you got to come through Chicago. Well, for the Blue Jays this year, you got to come through Toronto. And when you do, you had better have your mental toughness in order, or the Blue Jays are going to have a field day with you, and they get 4 out of the 7 games in Skydome. So you best bring your A game. The Mariners have to travel from Seattle, whereas the Blue Jays have been at home since Wednesday, getting themselves ready, working it out. How will Seattle approach Vladdy? That's another question. It got to a point with the Yankees where they chose to intentionally walk him at times. Are the Blue Jays going to face that again, where Seattle takes the bat out of his hand? Or are they going to try and pitch around him, pitch to him? We'll see early on in that game. Will they challenge him or pitch around him? His response, especially if they're pitching to him, is going to set the tone for the Jays in this series. He's the most dangerous hitter in this matchup. As we've mentioned earlier, the fatigue of the Seattle bullpen is really going to come into play here. I mean, Toronto used their bullpen a lot, especially in that Game 4, but they've had since Wednesday for all their pitchers to rest, do their normal in-between game stuff, and so here's going to be the question. Are they fresh for Game 1, or will there be a fatigue factor? Toronto's bullpen should be well rested, and this hopefully will be an advantage, one that's not overlooked, for the Toronto Blue Jays. Sadly, we were hoping to see Bo Bichette back for this series. His loss is significant, as he was second in the league in hits, being injured for the last 2-3 weeks of the season. So imagine if he doesn't get injured against the Yankees at the beginning of September, he probably leads the league in hitting this year. That's a big bat you're taking out of the middle of your order. Toronto's lineup has been able to adjust without him. They're going to have to continue that. Other players, as we've talked about, the Clements, Straws, Bargers, they're going to have to step up, as they've been doing, to fill that void. On the defensive side, that takes their best lineup off the field, because having Jimenez at second, Bichette at short, that's their best lineup. So they are going to miss him dearly in this series. Skydome crowd is going to be louder than anything that Seattle has experienced to this point. When Toronto travels to Seattle, we'll see how the organization handles that, because we all know when Toronto goes to Seattle, there's been times where it felt more like a Blue Jays home game than a Seattle home game, because Jays fans come down from Western Canada to see their team. So we'll see how Seattle deals with that, because I remember 2023, they were saying we're limiting the amount of Jays fans allowed in this game to try and combat the fact that it feels like a home game for the Blue Jays. So, what are we all looking for these days? People want to know when the game is. 8 o'clock tonight. They want to be knowing what's happening, what the ins and outs are going to be, what to look for. So hopefully this podcast has answered a lot of those questions. And so people are looking at what Vladdy's been doing. They've been tracking the stats. They know he's a marquee player, and his name at this point is synonymous with the Blue Jays and their World Series hope. They're looking at the odds for the Blue Jays to make it to the World Series, and whether there is a potential of them winning for the first time in 32 years. And people are saying, is this the year? Could this be the year? Now, the Mariners, they've got here. They've been here. Seattle fans are energized, looking at different aspects of this run. They're talking about the underdog story, and they want to know if their team can pull it off. They're looking at Gausman versus the Mariners in Game 1. They're looking at what Gausman did against New York, and the question is, will he keep it rolling against Seattle? Sure as heck seems like it to me, but we have to wait and let the games play out. They're talking about the atmosphere that this gonna see at Skydome and how that factor is going to play into the series. They're talking about how loud it will be, that the Canadian fan base is definitely a storyline in and of itself. Especially in Canada, people are talking about the Bichette factor and the fact that he is not on the roster for this series. And we've all been looking for updates on his status all the way along. We've been looking at what the roster is going to be, how it can be constructed, and yeah. For me, I'm looking at seeing this series. Now, again, y'all know I'm not one for predictions. I don't like getting into those things. And I'm thinking Toronto's got the edge in this series based on the fact that they have the home crowd, they have home field advantage, their pitching has been excellent at times, and if they grind out the at-bats, get into the Seattle bullpen, make them work for it, coming off of a hard-fought Detroit series, that could give Toronto the edge. Now, in 6, let's say, and see how it goes. So, let's see how we're looking at here. Alright, so as Canadian fans, we're looking at the Blue Jays as our representative in October baseball. This is bigger than just a playoff series. It could create some Canadian baseball history. We're watching it in real time. Seattle, they're writing their own story after the long absence from the playoffs. And so we'll see. Alright, so what's your guys' predictions? Let's use the hashtag TrueNorthSportsTalk. Let's get in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. We have another game coming on Monday night. Tonight's game starts at 8:03. The atmosphere is going to be unreal. And so stay tuned. Every night, as usual, we're going to talk about it in our 3-minute drill, as we always do. So come back, check it out, and hopefully you've got all the info. You're all set for tonight's game. And yeah, that's a wrap for us here at True North Sports Talk Podcast today. As always, Peter Barkley here, bringing you insight, analysis, and just letting you know exactly where your teams are at. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys tonight. And there it is. See you next time.